Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what we can see?
Hey, everybody, this is Harvey Sluggo Wasserman back with everybody for the 123rd, count them, 123, 1, 2, 3 Zoom calls. Welcome to be for our second of 2023. It's we got 34 people with us to start, and we've got a full agenda for our election protection operation here, along with our green power dimension. Generally, what we're doing, we're falling into a format. Well, the first hour we talk about election stuff, and the second hour we do environmental stuff. We'll keep more or less to that today, although we may get into the environmental stuff a little early. But it's great to see everybody as always. As you can see, I am at the beach, and my fashion statement today is for our best dressed congressman. I actually had a senator. I had a brief moment there. I saw John Fetterman, that's his name, right? Fetterman, wearing a suit. I guess they make you wear a tie on the floor of the U.S. Congress, and there he was standing in a suit. It looked like he was at his bar mitzvah. He looked very uncomfortable, but there he was, John Fetterman in a suit. So today what we're going to do is we're going to start, if John Brakey does join us, we're going to announce a little more detail about our national organization, the Alliance for Grassroots Democracy, where we are going to do two major agenda items rolling into the 24 election. We are going to be protecting our election and promoting paper ballots, and we do want to have a discussion, if Clint Curtis joins us, about scanning machines and the need or not for them. It's one of the reasons we're going to have John Brakey on us to talk about scanning machines. And then we're going to discuss, hopefully Ray McClendon will join us, we're going to discuss the shift to grassroots democracy and our emphasis on people who are going to be donating money to campaigns leading up to 24. We want that money to go to grassroots organizing and not to media advertising. So that's the first discussion we're going to have. We will discuss, as I say, the use of scanning machines. We are then going to segue in and talk about Peru. We have someone who's going to join us, thanks to Wendy Lederman, about the amazing things that are going on in Peru. And also, in the second hour, we're going to have a major focus with CAMILLA REES, a great activist on 5G, the spread of 5G, and also with Ron Leonard and Tim, the expert who's going to be joining us on 5G. We're going to talk about the war against solar, which is really, really escalating. These corporations really do not want decentralized solar, and we are in the throes of that battle. The beeps you hear, by the way, are people joining us, so kind of like to leave that in. So this is a big deal. It's a great outlook for us going ahead. I do want to start. I hate to keep starting our shows or our gatherings with memoriams for wonderful people who passed away, but Steve, if you could throw that picture up. We lost this past week one of our greatest rockers, David Crosby there. I knew Cros over the decades. He did a lot of anti-nuclear work, and he was, if you read the obits and the stories of David Crosby's life, he seemed to alienate a lot of the people he worked with, and he talked about it. He always referred to himself as having acted like an a-hole, which we can say on this show. But I knew him, I would meet him over the years, and we would always be cordial. He liked me in part because I was fighting, and still am, the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant, and he lived directly downwind from Diablo Canyon. He really wanted that thing shut. And he did a lot of great anti-nuclear work over the years. And for the past couple of whatevers, I've been listening. I've been listening to the first Crosby, Stills, Nash album, and it has not gotten old. It is still an incredibly great piece of work. We would play some of the music, but it's probably get us thrown off YouTube for copyright violations. So David lived to 81, by the way. If you'd have asked anybody who knew David Crosby in 1970 or so, would he live to 81? I don't think anybody would have said yes. I mean, he really he survived. He was a survivor. He went through all sorts of hell. He was in jail. He was a drug addict. He had guns. I mean, he was an amazingly interesting character, David, and very, very smart. He was a really, really good guy to talk to. It was a lot of fun. And he gave me what remains my first and only ride in a Tesla. So thank you for that, David. You will be missed, but your music lives on. Okay, bro, thank you for that. Thank you, Steve. If you can take the picture down, we can move ahead now. We're up to 50 people. Has John Brakey joined us? If not, I'm gonna give the wrap basically on the what we're going to do with the Alliance for Grassroots Democracy. Ray Lutz has joined us. Hi, Ray. Tatanka's with us. A lot of great people. So actually, very quickly, Tatanka, if you could give us a quick update on Leonard Peltier. I know you're going to do a lot more in a coming gathering, and I keep hearing a lot about Julian Assange. There does seem to be movement. Is there any movement, Tatanka, that you can tell us about getting Leonard Peltier out of jail?
No substantive movement. I will have people closer to that trial, but you mentioned that maybe not everyone knows. I just want to say a little bit about the history of this and why I think he's still in jail. Well, why is Julian still in jail? He revealed all the workings of our empire, and he revealed truths that are really important for a democracy, right? And the elite don't like that. They want to make a crime out of the act of journalism. Leonard is a symbol of the Wounded Knee resistance in the 70s, which is reminiscent of the original Wounded Knee resistance by the Lakota people. He is the symbol of a people who actually were standing up to have the US government live up to its treaty obligations and stand up for the culture and the rights of their people. The corporations that most covet the land on which Native people live in the United States are the extractive corporations. And many of you may not be aware, but it's not new, it's old, that the ultimate goal of the corporate class was to domesticize the native population, to have it become a melting pot, to have it have civil rights as they are, such that to join with the rest of citizens and thereby nullify the entire history of them having autonomy over their own land and having treaty rights. You may know that the US government has broken, I don't know if there's a treaty right they've observed. It's a history of broken promises. Leonard symbolizes the integrity of the indigenous population here, and that they want the US to live up to its commitments. The corporations want that land. That's the oil, that's the uranium, that's all the stuff, and it ties directly into why they don't want democratized solar. Anyway, that's a larger discussion, but that's how important Leonard is. He's survived these 50 plus years in jail there's no real reason for him to be there at all. The case has totally fallen apart decades ago. So why haven't Democratic or Republican senators released him? I think it gets down to that. So I'll leave it for that for now.
Harvey, you're muted.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Thank you much. Thank you for that. Tatanka will have a deeper discussion of that later on, but very, very well stated. I mean, why can't, let me ask you a question, Tatanka. Why can't they just give him a new trial? Why can't the President of the United States just say, well, okay, I'm not going to take a stand on this. He should have a new trial. Why is that such a big deal?
Why is it such a big deal to come to Truth and Reconciliation? on all the sins or violations of the empire. I mean, it just means uncovering decades and decades and hundreds of years of lies. And how it works between, I can only imagine, I'm not privy to this, but how it works between the pressure of the most powerful moneyed people in the world and those who are in Congress and who sit in the seat of the president, whom I call a fairly well-paid temp worker. It's basically it, you know, the people that are there, the revolving door of the corporations and their lackeys are there for hundreds of years. The people who hold the office are there for a short period of time. So I think it just means owning up to the true history, the people's history of the United States, now the people's spiral history of the United States that everybody should read. I think it's as, you know, as simple and as complicated as that.
I will tell you one thing from the history. You know, George Washington was a terrible Indian killer. He really, as a general, he killed a lot of Indians. But he was in a battle actually when he was a young man in the British Army. He was in a battle around what's now Pittsburgh, and he was shot 8 times, and somehow managed to survive. And the Indians, the indigenous, thought that was actually pretty amazing. They held him kind of in awe, and he had another name, was Kodokataris, something like that, which meant a killer of villages. And so he was not a good guy to the indigenous, but he did respect them. And in fact, he adopted indigenous guerrilla tactics to win the American Revolution. We never would have won the American Revolution without using indigenous tactics that George Washington learned from the Western tribes.
Harvey, to get to the military connection, the most poignant moment in the whole resistance at Standing Rock to me were the veterans down on their knees making amends to the native people. Can you imagine the symbol, Leonard Peltier, of that resistance movement and another meeting of veterans bringing their friends and the power that that would have for our politics? There's many reasons why the people in power they want him to die in jail.
Yes, they do. And, you know, I'm sure they're going to try and hurry it up. Same as Julian Assange. They want him
Same as Julian Assange. Yes.
They want him to die as well. So Washington, who had a sense of honor. I mean, I know I get in trouble with progressives defending George Washington, but there are a couple of things that he did. First, most importantly, he did not make himself dictator. George Washington ran the Revolutionary Army, and at the end of the war, he stepped down. I mean, where in history does that happen? People who win a revolution with an army almost always keep the army and take over the country. Washington went back to farm, and of course, his favorite crop, by the way, was hemp. There's no indication that he smoked it, but there's no doubt that he loved hemp. And he and Tom Jefferson had a major correspondence about hemp. They loved raising hemp, way easier than tobacco. But at any rate, when Washington became president, you know, there was a lot of course, conflict with the indigenous, and most of the country did not want to even sign treaties with the indigenous. They did not want to recognize the indigenous tribes as having any kind of sovereignty or any kind of credibility. And Washington is the reason that we had treaties, because he insisted that we do meet with the tribes and that we do have signed treaties. And he said, there's a quote which I'll paraphrase. He said that if our country, or our new nation, the United States, does not honor these treaties, it will be a stain on our honor. That was a quote from Washington. Now, very quaint, as they would say now, the idea that we would even care about our honor, but we signed, representatives of the government of the United States signed over 800 treaties with the indigenous. More than 400 were subsequently ratified by the Congress. And treaties are supposed to be, they're at the top of the food chain in terms of law. You recognize treaties before you recognize any other law. They take precedence. And we have broken more than 400 treaties with the indigenous. I love when during the Cold War, they were always yelling about how the Soviets never kept their word and always broke their treaties. And here we are with the indigenous, well over 400. And by the way, I can't resist this. There was a conflict between the indigenous in Maine, the Penobscot, and the government over land. And what happened, I couldn't make this up, I'm sorry. In the 1950s, a tribal chief in Maine passed away. And they opened up his car, and in his trunk was a treaty signed by George Washington. The document itself was worth $1 million. And they took that treaty, and there was a 30-year negotiation. And the tribe, based on that treaty signed by George Washington, forced in the courts a partial acknowledgement and they got like $80 million.
Harvey,
Yeah.
just another connection for people to think about. You know, the United Nations as it exists, there's a dozen or two colonizing countries there with that history. And then there's the vast number of people that are the colonized, and they talk with each other, okay? Imagine Leonard Peltier free. Imagine U.S. representatives, State Department, representative of the United Nations talking about honoring commitments, talk about human rights, and to have Leonard Peltier and a movement resurrect.
Yes.
They do not want to see any kind of movement resurrect, period, much less that, which is at the heart of everything. And I believe that our movement really needs to start with that truth and reconciliation process with the Native people, onto slavery, et cetera. That builds the unity that we need.
Well, imagine them also talking about with Julian Assange. I think what's going to happen with Julian Assange is he's going to go to Australia. You know, there's a new prime minister in Australia, as we've discussed. They're going to have a hard time telling Australia, no, you can't have Julian Assange. The problem is that, you know, we don't have, well, the indigenous have sovereignty based on the Supreme Court decision in the Cherokee case. So it's going to be, I just hope to God that he lives. We need to pray for the health of Leonard Peltier, for his reason, you know, for him personally, but for what he stands for and what it would mean to have him free. That would be an incredible event to get him out. Biden has shown no inclination. There's been nothing come to there. But, you know, we have to remember as progressives, and most of us are, of course, on this call. By the way, there are 73 people on the call now. But we have to remember that Bill Clinton went 8 years without dealing with Leonard Peltier. He was approached many times. At the end of his term, he had the ability to, you know, at the end of their terms, presidents traditionally give pardons. And he pardoned some guy named Mark Rich, who was a total multimillionaire crook, and would not free Leonard. Just outrageous. And then in comes Barack Obama, and he goes 8 years without freeing Leonard. I mean, George W. Bush, you can understand. But you got two Democrats, 16 years between them, and they never freed Leonard, and they never gave him a new trial. Completely outrageous.
And I'm aware, Harvey, of a move that seemed possible for a while through Donald Trump, through people, and the whispering in his ear was, if you free him, you'll be able to do what Obama could never do. And some people were hopeful that Trump would release Leonard, but nobody with the pressure that they get from the extractive industries has been willing to stand up to that.
Yeah.
And then we go back to our history of Kennedy and people who stand up and want to make changes, things like that.
It's outrageous. It's really outrageous. Justin LeBlanc, you've had your hand up. You always have intelligent things to say. Then Mimi, and then Wendy. And also Lynn Feinerman, you sent me a note I can't read. So if you're on, that'd be great. Go ahead, Justin. Justin LeBlanc, are you unmuted?
Tatanka, there was some recent Supreme Court activity around states wanting to enforce state laws on indigenous reservations over and above indigenous laws.
Yes.
What's become of that?
Oh, that's still in play. State of South Dakota particularly. And the thing, it's come in, as I know it, from Danny Sheehan around the Indian Child Welfare Act, where they want to, I don't know, do we have time to talk about this or not?
Yeah, go ahead real quickly.
Okay.
Let's do it.
The case is, it actually came out of Texas, but it's happened a lot in the Dakotas. There's a case in Texas where there is a law that the United States Congress passed that Danny Sheehan and Sarah Nelson were a part of a couple decades ago that said that if a child is taken from its indigenous family, it has to, for some reason, for alcoholism or abuse or something, that child has to be placed in an indigenous home, or at least somewhere in the tribe. And that law has been on the books. So some years ago out of Texas, a young couple wanted to adopt an indigenous young person, and it was an infant. And they put in for adoption, and it was given to them because immediately in the week or two after the baby was born, they couldn't find an immediate relative in the I believe it was a Lakota child. Then there was an auntie about 2 months in who said, fine, I want the child. They went to court, and following the law, it was taken from the white couple and given to the auntie. They filed suit. Some of the money from the suit came from Exxon.
Jesus.
Yeah, this is true. And it went to the state Supreme Court, and then up to the federal Supreme Court, and then back and forth. The argument was that this child is deserving of all civil rights as a U.S. citizen, not as an indigenous person. The hope is to undermine, and thank you, Justin, for this, to undermine the law of the land and the treaty rights. So why was Exxon involved? You know, they're looking for any kind of Trojan horse to change the legal status of Native people to that of the rest of us and everything we have to do to get our rights, and to take away their autonomy as autonomous nations, to take away their land, basically. And so that's what's in play right now, bouncing back and forth between the state and the U.S. Supreme Court.
I bet Exxon is very, very heavily behind the refusal to give justice to Leonard Peltier. I mean, obviously the extractive industries do not want indigenous rights to proceed here. So, you know, that's something I hadn't really thought about. Dennis Bernstein from Flashpoints, welcome. Dr. Ruth, great to have you with us as well, fellow KPFK supporter. You know, if I was to get on here and start to explain what's going on in Pacifica Radio, you people wouldn't believe it. So we'll defer that for another millennium. Thank you, Tatanka, for that explanation. It's amazing how the issue with the indigenous continues. Lynn Feinerman, I'm going to go to Mimi in a minute, but Lynn, I wanted to give you the chance. You texted me to discuss your program real quick. Do you want to do that? Lynn Feinerman, are you unmuted?
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me? Yes, yes, we can.
And then we'll go to Wendy and Mary.
Yeah, the new Women Wrestling radio program, which I put a link to it in the chat, is all about this very issue. It's 3 key women who were involved in the truth and healing cycles in Canada, and the truth and healing cycles that have begun here with Deb Holland in the United States, and who visited the Vatican bringing an empty cradle board to the Pope. And it's all about what you discuss, Harvey, in your wonderful history book regarding the doctrine of discovery. And the upshot of the program is that we must revoke the doctrine of discovery. We must get the Vatican to revoke that doctrine of discovery. So anyway, I just put the link in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Your stuff is great, much appreciated.
And Harvey, just before you go on,
Yeah, please.
you know, there's been a battle. It's taken another form now, but Steve Bannon at one time had a little kind of castle given him by wealthy people right near the Vatican, was organizing fascists right out of the Vatican, with Zoom calls, etc. And his real hatred is for this Pope Francis. There's a number of things that he disagrees on, but key among them will be the doctrine of discovery.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. Okay, Paul Newman, it's great to see you. I love your hat. You look like you just knocked off a gas station. So there you go. Okay, Mimi Spreadbury, please, and then Wendy.
Hi, thanks everyone. Nice to see you. Really glad I could join you today. I have a quick question, and then I have a quick follow-up to what Tatanka had said. But are we going to be discussing solar today?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
we're gonna have
I'll
a
just
lot
shut
of
up.
solar today.
I'll be quiet then. So thank you. Glad to hear that. But
Okay.
yeah, that's a super hot issue here in California, as you know, Harvey and
Right.
everybody. So
Yeah,
what I wanted to tell Tatanka and others is that Congresswoman Barbara Lee introduced last legislative season a bill for truth, racial healing, and transformation. So this would be something similar to what they have in Canada. So may I read a quick blurb about that? And then I will put the link in the chat. It's from Vox. So Congressman Lee shared this on the National Day of Racial Healing, which is the day after Martin Luther King Day. So she wrote, "We are reminded that systemic racism contributes to life-threatening disparities in healthcare, our economy, environment, and so much more." Excuse me. "My own mother almost died while giving birth to me and was denied critical care due to the color of her skin." So last paragraph, "Senator Booker and I are pushing for a US Commission on Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation because we cannot heal without a national truth-telling moment." And so Indigenous folks are mentioned in the preamble as well. So this is something really great that, you know, perhaps PDA can support or put out an action alert to contact our Congress members, or maybe something our liaisons want to talk about, because I mean, it's just shocking. Systemic.
Let me just jump in. Yeah, PDA is 100% in support of that. We were involved with the drafting of the legislation. We've been running action alerts and lobbying for that legislation, and it's very, very important. And I'm so glad that you brought that up, and it's something that we need to revisit in the new Congress. We had quite a few co-sponsors in the last Congress, but every new Congress we start out at 0. So we need to get into gear and get behind Barbara Lee, who's on our National Advisory Board, somebody who we're very close with, and make this happen. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. So that was shared last Tuesday, which is the National Day of Racial Healing. And thanks for that, Mike, and thank you for my time. And thanks again to Tonka for that update. Thanks, everyone.
And since you got to be careful when you refer to history, because you get me going. In the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson put in a paragraph or a line denouncing the king's complicity with slavery. It's really weird. Tom Jefferson, who owned slaves, put in a very anti-slave paragraph into the Declaration of Independence, and the Congress took it out. But they left in a line about the king leaving the colonists vulnerable to attacks by the indigenous. He did not use the term indigenous, but it's very, very anti-indigenous in the Declaration of Independence. So we ought to have a movement to pull that out of the
They're called savages, right, which is unconscionable. So
Jefferson promised the tribes of the Delaware tribes that if they adopted white ways, that they would be accepted in American society, or mainstream United States. At the same time that he bought Louisiana with the specific agenda item of moving the Indians out there, which he didn't do, but Jackson, actually Martin Van Buren did it. But there you go. So our history with the indigenous in relations with this country goes all the way back to Declaration of Independence, for God's sakes. So maybe we can rectify some of that. Wendy Lederman.
Thank you. Great conversation. It's important that we're discussing this. Kind of going back a little bit to Peltier and Assange, and you guys brought up Exxon, and that was what I wanted to just touch on, was really the overview, because there's another name we're forgetting here too, which is Donziger. And really the elephant in the room, I guess, is the corporate takeover of the government, in a sense, where all of this, even our wars, everything, you know, whether it's, you know, the war logs that WikiLeaks revealed was because we're at war to get oil for Halliburton and to make guns and bombs for Raytheon and Northrop Grumman, and it's always leads back to the financial interest. And when we see with Donziger, I mean, we have a case there where Chevron bought Texaco, who had dumped, I mean, thousands and thousands of gallons of oil. Thousands of people in Ecuador have been dying for years from this. And Donziger won a settlement for the people and was able to declare the guilt of the oil companies. And he spent like a year and a half, I think, or longer on house arrest, because Chevron went in and was able to hold him in contempt somehow. Like the actual corporation was using the court system, and our government, in a sense, is just working by proxy for these corporations. And hopefully we'll have a chance prepared to speak about the forest defenders in Atlanta right now. So whenever we have time, if we get a chance, but right now we have the first eco-activist was slain, was murdered, was killed and shot in a 26-year-old kid was shot in the forest in Atlanta trying to defend from what's being called Cop City from being built in the last green space in Atlanta there. So hopefully we'll have a chance to discuss that a little bit more, but it's all about
let's do that now. What was this kid's name? I read about him. I wanted to talk about him. He's a beautiful guy, and he was murdered by the police. Is there a forest in Atlanta? What is that? What's that all about?
So it's the Walini, I think it's Walini land, and even some of the Lakota people had sent people down there because they've been occupying this last forest space that was like partially home to the creek, and it's like the last forest area within Atlanta. And right after, ironically, right after the BLM protests, they got some harebrained idea to build what's called a Cop City. And it's this massive training facility in the heart of the city that I think Israeli forces are going to be training the police on how to suppress rebellion and civil unrest. And it's just, I mean, a real militarization, largest like police school. Like, what did they think was going to happen when they decided to put this there? And just a quick side note, like, it's not too far from what we used to be called the School of the Americas, where we would train the paramilitary to go down to South America and team up with all the bad people doing bad things there. So it's just really weird there. So you had these forest defenders, naturally, like, what do you think is going to happen when you try to take this sacred land and put a giant cop school there? Like, you're obviously instigating something. And so finally, after a year of the cops just doing these intimidation tactics and going in and using tear gas and arresting people under domestic terrorism charges, especially people, welcome John Brakey, I see he just got here, especially domestic terrorism charges against people that were coming from other places to sit in with these people that have like made a community within the forests and tree houses. They have, you know, kitchens and all kinds of things like set up to occupy. And so the cops went in last Wednesday, and the reports from local residents and from other protesters was that it was just one loud boom of gunfire. But the official reports with the Guardian and Rolling Stone and Democracy Now! And a lot of places are saying that there's potentially a cover-up going on. Is the official report is that the kid, Manuel Turan, known as Tortuguita or Little Turtle, Venezuelan, 26, he was shot And the report is that he fired first and shot a state trooper in the stomach. But they're not releasing any body cam footage. They're saying there is no body cam footage, but there's photos of the cops that are wearing the body cam footage. There's no details being released. We don't know how many times or what range Tortuguito was shot at. There's no details being released, but his mother is calling it an assassination. And all of the witness reports are not lining up with what the police said, but he's the first eco-activist, peaceful demonstrator to be murdered on American soil. And it's a really heartbreaking story. And there's been vigils all weekend and just other protests throughout the country in all different cities that aren't being reported, just like Peru's not being reported on right now, the uprisings that are happening. But please look up the Atlanta Forest Defenders and support them. Look into this cop city because it's just dirty from the start. What did they think was going to happen when they put that there? Thank you.
Right. Well, probably what happened is what they wanted to happen. Thank you for that, Wendy. We'll come back to Peru before we finish the hour, but Mary, Dorothy, and Dennis have hands up. So go ahead, Mary, please. Mary Butler.
We do have John Brakey here today.
Yes, John Brakey, welcome. We're going to get you in a couple minutes. We've been having a great, this is what happens when you have a great group of people. There's always great stuff to talk about. I want to thank, by the way, John Steiner, welcome to the call and thank you for your generous donation to help continue these calls. We really appreciate it. So thank you for that. Mary and then Dennis. I don't know where Dorothy went. Mary Stonewall Butler and then Dennis Bernstein.
Hello.
Yeah, hi. Go ahead, Mary, real quick, please. Oh, there's Dorothy.
Real quick, I want to point out if we could overturn the case law that Reagan put out there that made it deregged monopolies of radios and TV stations, because he's the one that reneged on that and made it to where you could now monopolize and own more than 3 or 6 or whatever. We had to look to that case law in order to protect Pacifica Radio. When it comes to Exxon, people, if you don't know it, when Exxon Valdez finally paid out, I knew one of the families in the check had 0.00 on the check because the lawyers and everybody else ate it all up, and none of the people that really suffered got any payback. And then finally, how come we're not talking about the fact that U.S. economy right now is coming, the debt is coming due this month, and what are we going to do about that? And what's it going to do to America? And if truly we wanted to save America for all of us, it'd be nice if the indigenous nation would buy up that debt from the foreign countries, because there's 2 ways to take a country. One is war and one is owning their debt. And I don't like all these other countries owning our debt. I think it'd be more fun if the native cultures here were able to buy that debt. I'm sure China and other countries would get a big kick at it and sell it at a cheaper rate than what they got it, because that's how you sell debt.
Okay. Thank you, Mary. Thank you for that. I will point out that the indigenous did buy Alcatraz back from the mayor of San Francisco for $24 in junk jewelry, and they kept it for almost 2 years. So there you go. Dennis, Dorothy, are you off the phone? Dennis and then Dorothy. Okay. Okay.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Dennis.
Obviously, I appreciate this beautiful get together every week. It's so important, getting more important all the time. We're going to devote the entire show tomorrow to the killing in Atlanta. We have the attorney and some of the key activists that we will have on the show tomorrow. It's absolutely horrific. I just want to remind people, I was in Tucson, Arizona in 1985 and 1986 covering what was called the Tucson Sanctuary Trial. And that was about folks who were fleeing El Salvador and Guatemalan, among other things, Guatemalan death squads, and who were being brutalized. Well, while we're covering and hearing unbelievably horrific Nazi stories, by the way, during the trial, somebody who was part of the liberators of the Nazi camps in Germany stood up on the first day of the trial his hands were full of blood and he slapped them against the wall and said, "The blood of Central America is all over our hands." But while I'm covering that trial in Tucson, the Tucson Police Department is training cops from Guatemala and El Salvador based on a US finance problem. So essentially, as we continue to do in Haiti and other countries, we were training the death squads that were forcing the people out of the country in the same kind of structure as what's happening in Atlanta. It's extremely dangerous, and not only is it horrible for destroying the environment, but they're going to be bringing in the killers to train.
Terrible. Dennis, would you put in your in the chat your show Flashpoints is on in the Bay Area at 5 p.m. Pacific time every day. How do people who are not in the Bay Area, you're also on in LA a lot, but how do people get to you? Are you online?
kpfa.org, kpfa.org, flashpoints.net, kpfa.org, flashpoints.net. If you go to kpfa.org, just either hit the live button at 5 o'clock or there's an archive. By the way, the program is podcasted everywhere. So if you want to get it, you can get it by podcast as well. Thank you, Hawk.
Thank you, Dennis. Great to have you on as always. Dorothy Wright. Dorothy.
Hi. So yeah, anybody who gets my newsletter knows I've been covering Tortuguina's killing and all what's been going on all over with the environmental fascists, whatever you want to call them. I just thought it was interesting. This morning I found an article on SheerPost. Peru's natural resources. CIA linked U.S. ambassador meets with mining and energy ministers to talk investments. This is what's going on while they're murdering the indigenous people of Peru for protesting that their president was jailed.
Right.
You just can't make this stuff up. It's all so evil. And if anybody hasn't followed what went on with why is his name not coming to me? The Chevron gentleman. They totally hijacked the whole legal process. The government would not prosecute him, so they got a special judge and special court to prosecute him. They put him in jail. They had him under house arrest. Chevron owns this country. It was just appalling, and now it's going to the Supreme Court. I have my doubts, but maybe they'll be outraged enough to do something about it. He has a really good Instagram account. If you want to know what he's been up to,
what's his name?
there.
Dorothy, what's his name again?
Steve Donziger.
Donziger.
Yeah.
Put that in the chat.
He's
That'd be great.
Yeah, he's an amazing man, so brave, so strong. He won billions of dollars for Ecuador from Chevron, and they weren't about to pay it. So they took away his law license.
Right. It's outrageous.
If anybody wants to see the Belmarsh Tribune is online. You can you can watch it on YouTube. Amy Goodman this morning had an excerpt from it. If you don't want to watch the whole 2.5 hours, she has good excerpts from it today on her website. You just don't know what to do anymore.
Okay.
I mean,
keep
Stephen
fighting.
Donziger is being targeted for practicing law effectively.
Right. And I got to tell you, the extent to which this country will go, Eugene V. Debs, who was born and raised in Terre Haute, Indiana, and was, one of the probably the most famous labor leader in the history of the United States, gave a speech against war 2 months from the end of World War I, and they put him in jail for 10 years, and they took away his right to vote. Can you imagine this? This guy was born and raised in Indiana. He was a great, great public citizen, and because he spoke against war, they retracted his right to vote and put him in prison. It's just amazing. Jeffrey Bartow, real quickly, and then we're going to go to John Brakey. Jeffrey, real quick, please. Jeffrey, you gave a great
Thank you. We're talking about Peru, right?
Wendy, did the gentleman who was going to speak to us from Peru. Is he with us?
Yes, Lorenzo Canizares. He's
Oh, okay. John, if you can wait a couple minutes, we do want to talk about Peru real quick. Go ahead, Jeffrey,
John,
real quick. And
Lorenzo,
will
my
you,
question involves Peru.
all right, well, why don't we let Lorenzo, all right, go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick. And Lorenzo, if you'll answer Jeffrey's question, that'd be great. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Lorenzo, are you there?
Go.
Yes, I am here.
All right.
You want to start with a question or?
Yeah, I wanted to know if this is being committed. You can back me up here, Justin LeBlanc, if you want to. Yeah, I want to know if democracide is being committed, but or otherwise known as crimes against democracy in Peru.
Okay, good question. Good question. Thank you for that, Jeffrey. Excellent. Go ahead, Lorenzo, if you'll introduce yourself and give us a quick talk on Peru, we'd appreciate it.
Okay, I didn't understand the question well, but let me start by saying that I consider what's happening in Peru the most important event in humanity today. And the reason I'm saying that is because it's a victory of the popular forces in Peru happens, and I tell you the truth, the way I'm seeing it, I don't see any other avenue but a victory in Peru, and that if that happens, then we will have a domino effect in many other places in the world where white supremacy is in hot water and in danger. As you know, I mean, there have been a trend towards more progressive forces winning elections in South America and Central America. And one of the things that we need to remember when we're talking about winning elections is that you're talking about the presidential power. These people that are elected not necessarily have a control of the system. The system operates in the same way that our system here operates, it probably even more blunt in those countries because the laws are somewhat weaker. In Peru, Pedro Castillo got elected, and since day one, they try to what I mean they is the opposition that would be the kind of an equivalency to the Republican Party here, have been trying to create a situation where Castillo wouldn't be able to govern. And so I don't know if that answers your question, Jeffrey, because what happened in Peru is an inability for democracy to be exercised, and created a situation where Castillo somewhat was kind of forced to do what he did, and that situation gave an excuse towards the people that wanted to hurt the Peruvian people, wanted to maintain the control. When in the beginning of the conversation here tonight, a lot of the things that we're talking about, Leonard Pertier and the history that Harvey was talking about in regards to the Native Americans experience history, this thing is very similar towards what is happening in Peru. I mean, it's it's a class war veiled in racial terms, which is in many ways, again, the situation that we are facing here in the United States. We are involved in a class war that is being circumscribed by external issues that have been very, very productive for those people that maintain control of our economics in society. So that is and the one aspect that we should point out in regards to the class war component is, why is it that a newspaper like the New York Times, considered the best paper in the world, hasn't in January 19th, a few days ago, nothing. Today, nothing in Peru. I mean,
Lorenzo, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but just to get just for the interest of time, if we could enlighten people on what's not being reported as you're saying, just let us know. So we had Castillo come into power and he was up against these fascist forces. So I guess he got rid of the Congress and they ousted him. And now there's like massacres happening in the streets because there's people, like massive amounts of indigenous and peasants and like proletariat in the streets now, and they're being slaughtered. Can you just let us know what's going on with that, please? Thank you.
Let me update Lorenzo for a sec. We're going to go to the top of the hour. We have 7 minutes left on Peru. If you can explain, Wendy, who Lorenzo is, so we can introduce him properly. At the top of the hour, we're going to stop this Peru discussion and we'll break the tape. So we'll have a holistic presentation. In the second hour, we're going to be joined by Camilla Rees, who's on with us to talk about 5G, and also a brief presentation from John Brakey on the national organization. We will discuss that in greater detail next week, but I want John to give us a quick taste beforehand. Okay, Wendy, so if you'll tell us who Lorenzo is, we've got 6 minutes, and then we can wrap this up nicely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Harvey, and thanks, Lorenzo, for being here. Lorenzo Canizares is he's the lead of the Miami, the Labor Community Alliance of South Florida, which is just a network of all the key players in Florida, really, and all the progressive organizations. And he's Cuban American, and he's also done some great grassroots organizing in Pennsylvania. He works a lot with all the labor unions and the education unions and environmental groups. I mean, you name it, he's there. And so I'm also looking forward to having him be a part of the future talk with just the grassroots organizing and getting Florida involved. But Lorenzo really has his finger on the pulse with a lot of what's going on in Latin America and what's going here with, again, I'll just say the word, the proletariat and the workers. So thank you so much for being here. A very dear friend of mine. Thank you, Lorenzo. Take it away.
Lorenzo,
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you for
it's an honor
inviting
to
me.
have you with us. If you can give us in 5 minutes what's going on in Peru, that I know it's a tough task, but it would be great. We'd be honored to hear it from you.
Okay. Well, at this time, it seems like all hell is breaking loose. And today I was watching videos of the police entering the university, San Marcos University, and they were they were shooting. I don't believe, at least when I saw the video, that they have killed anybody yet, but they have been the last time I read, there have been already 53 deaths in Peru. Basically, what you have there now is a situation not too different in a larger way that what happened in New York City with Occupy New York. They're calling it La Toma de Lima, which is basically Occupy Lima. And the thing with that is that basically they have 4 points that they want done. One is the resignation of who before was the vice president, Dina Boluarte, who she's now the president, and she has been basically the person in charge of all these murders that have happened in Peru. They want to they want to create a situation where there was a new constitution being written. The constitution that they're working in now from is a constitution that was done by Alberto Fujimori, who is in jail now from corruption, and his daughter is the main leader, the ideological leader of the opposition, Keiko Fujimori, and they want a new constitution because the constitution there. I mean, if we have problem here with our system in terms of being able to move around it, multiply that by 2, and that would be the situation in Peru. It's a very confining constitution. So that's one of the things that the people are asking. People are asking also for the new elections. They are promising elections in 2024. People want those elections right now. In order to be able to change the government. So, I mean, we have the resignation of Dina Boluarte, the new constitution, new elections, and the freedom of Pedro Castillo. Pedro Castillo is a very interesting person because Pedro Castillo yeah.
If you'll do that, tell us real quickly, and then we're going to have to wrap, and we want you back next week because we need to have this a greater discussion. It would be really great. So tell us who this guy is that we want freed, and then you'll come back next week and we'll talk more about Peru and about Atlanta. Okay.
All right. That's a deal.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
And I enjoy it. Thank you very much for having me.
And stay with us because we're going to be discussing something that we want you involved with is a new national organization. So this first hour, Steve and Mike, we're gonna wrap. This has been the first hour of the 123rd Green Grassroots Emergency Election Protection Coalition Zoom meeting. Our first hour is usually taken with politics and protecting democracy. Our second hour goes into the environment, but we're going to start our second hour with John Brakey and discussion of very quickly a new political organization, and then go to Camilla Rees and talk about 5G and other incredibly important environmental and health issues. Thank you so much, Steve Caruso and Mike Hurst for engineering, Wendy Lederman, Camilla Rees, and so many others who were involved in putting this all together. We have 78 people with us, and we're going to segue. And thank you, listeners at Progressive Radio Network. If you want to see or hear the second hour of this, go to the site electionprotection2024.org, where all these shows are archived. So we are now going to sign off, briefly break the tape, and start a second holistic piece of the Greek.
Was there an Adam? Was there an Eve? Or did we evolve from what